Okay, we're going to go ahead and let this guy dry because we got him all touched up, and just scoot him off to the side here. Not in the way anymore. Make sure it runs inside the booth. And then I've already got my airbrush loaded up with Quicksilver 4104, and that's all you need. You don't need any reducer. It comes right out of the bottle. Make sure you give it a good shake. And these parts were already cleared, remember, with 4050 a while back, the greebles that go on Boba Fett's helmet. I'm just going to get a nice coat of this silver on here that then we're going to build up some other colors and some wear and effects on as soon as we're done with these. But I want these to get good and coated and dry, a couple hours dry afterwards before I do any masking or painting directly on them. So I'm not using a spray gun on this. I will be using my Eclipse CS because I don't need a spray gun. These are very small parts. And let's go ahead and get at it. Now I got some of these kind of wet, so they might mottle a little bit, but man, this silver is going to look so thrashed anyway, it's supposed to. In this area, we had that bodywork on the top. This whole area on the top's going black. This Quicksilver is so fine. In other words, this is pure aluminum, pure 6061 microground pigment. And it literally, so when you coat something with it, you literally are coating it, like coating it with aluminum. But so thin you can see through it. It's kind of funky in that respect. So it won't cover anything. I mean, it won't cover any damage. In this situation, that's going black anyway. I'm not worried about it. But this will act as a good base coat. This stuff sticks really, really well to many products. It definitely sticks well to 4050 since it's kind of familiar with it. It's another Createx product. All Createx products work very well in the sandbox together. So I'm going to kind of just blow some air on it and then kind of hit it again. These are all parts of that Boba Fett helmet, except for that. That's R2-D2's little visor thing, and a little precursor. We're going to be doing some R2-D2 stuff in the future on a video, so keep an eye out on that one. But let me get another couple coats on this, and then we'll see where we're at. Okay, last thing we were doing was spraying all these little, I believe we call them greebles. That's what they're referred to, the things that glue on the helmet, using Quicksilver, which is the 4104 right here. By the way, whenever you're using this, always give it a good shake, a little ball inside, and never add reducer. You don't need to. This stuff sticks all by itself, great to anything, and can spray through. I would not put it in a micron, but you can put it in Eclipse CS, no problem whatsoever. Matter of fact, I believe I sprayed all this with Eclipse CS. Now, before I start painting on these, I'm actually going to be doing some masking. The cool thing is I just had this sitting on here for painting. This part remains silver, but this whole piece stays black. I just painted it silver now because it was easier, and it actually has a good adhesion promoter. The silver sticks really well. And this is all going to go black, so I'm going to come in and do some masking on these parts to bring in the black. The helmet we have back here, and I'm going to be using, if you wonder, I'm using reference images of, I found a number of different shots of a Lucas-approved Boba Fett helmet. And you can see the silver erosion areas. Now, we're going to be doing those with a brush, but if you notice, there is some yellow little striping right here on the side, like insignias. We're going to do that first, and that's going to need to be masked off. So I'm going to be masking off with some vinyl, and then come in and start putting in those stripes, and then I'll start coming in and just dabbing the silver. There's 3 colors we're going to do on this helmet. There is a silver, there is a darker silver that I'm going to literally just add some black to, this original silver, and come in. Then there is a secondary color, which is interesting because the piece that goes right here on the helmet, this, actually has some of the color in it. Actually, it's not that piece, it's this piece on the other side of the helmet. It has some of that color in it, so it looks like this helmet was another color at one time and then was painted over. So we're going to mix up a really pale yellow that's going to go on this. It's a little bit less pale than the yellow that's up here, but what I'll do is I'll take the same yellow, which I've already mixed up. If you're wondering what color it is, that is Injury Ochre with a couple of drops of white to lighten it up, and mixed with about 30% of the 4050 for adhesion, and from the illustration line. We're going to brush that in here, and then we're going to add more white to that and spray it on here. You always want to strategically think your colors and your steps, because it can save you time and save you paint. I don't need to necessarily mix up all these colors. My silver and my dark silver are going to be the same color, just with black added to it. My yellow and my light yellow, same yellow, just with white added to it. You start doing this stuff, you save on paint, you save on time, you save on the cups and cleaning and all. When it all comes down to it, that is the part your money is going away fastest at, the nickel and dime stuff. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start laying out that one yellow. I also went through and looked at the image to make sure, the yellow stripes on this helmet, the insignias, is it anywhere else on the helmet? It's not. Therefore, I'm not worried about that. That's got to go here first, because the silver is eroded around it from like when the paint ships down to the bare metal of the helmet. So because of that, I need to get that yellow on there first. Then when I apply the silver, I can go over it to make it look like paint chips. So we're actually kind of painting it the opposite. You know, the silver that looks like the underlying metal is now being put on top. That needs to be the last thing, so it has a distinct, sharp contrast like a paint chip. So enough talking. Let's go ahead and start laying this tape out. Coincidentally, I noticed whoever did the original Boba Fett design is very similar to me. They based everything with in 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch categories, so we don't have to do that much cutting. So I'm going to come in and put this band, this tape right here along the edge, as the starting point for those insignias. Now there are a million different versions of Boba Fett's helmet out there, even within the actual Lucasfilm original trilogy, there's different variations on it. I guarantee the two helmets on the set for the first movie probably had some differences about them. And otherwise, if there weren't, they wouldn't call certain props hero props and not. So you can really pick which ones you want to stick with. But be consistent. You don't want to take two different examples and because then you'll get two different schools of people yelling at you. I prefer to only have one person yell at me at a time. It makes my life a little bit easier. If you want to get really crazy and start blowing up the helmet and figuring out the exact sizes knock yourself out. Not going to do that. So, but I am going to look and see approximately where that starts. Looks to me that the first yellow stripe is about 2 inches into here. I'm using this as a reference right there. So I'm going to come in right about there for the first actual beginning of the stripe. And let's see, where would the last one be? Last one looks like it is literally a little bit more than that on the back here. So I'm going to come in. I'll just snap it first so I don't pull on the helmet too much. Right about there. I'm not going to press it down because I may change it. Looking at the distance between them, looks like approximately about the same width as the gap I gave down here. Gee, what a coincidence. That way I can just keep on using 1/8 inch tape the whole time. But the stripes themselves are a little bit thicker, so you can eyeball that. So I'm just going to come in and lay these all in. That was a little bit thicker than I want it to be. There we go, right about that. And I will be brushing these in because some of these, the paint was not all the way on there. So instead of me painting them all solid, then coming in with green to put in the background color, I'm just going to kind of brush them in. Plus I want them to look like they're kind of eroded. So I'll be using a brush on this, but I still want to mask off everything so I don't get any stray flecks of paint on the rest of my helmet here. By the way, there is no protective clear on this right now. This is the actual color. If you're worried about that, I could come in and put an extra coat, just a light coat of 4050 on this to give me a little bit of a barrier. I've got so much erosion and texture going on this helmet, any screw up, I can just make it look like I did it on purpose anyway. So don't again, time. So, and if I did spray the 450 on there, I can't touch it for another hour. So again, think about it. I'm gonna get this all masked off and then we'll come right back when I start doing the actual painting. Okay, I got this all nice and masked. I'm not airbrushing, so I just want a little bit of masking to prevent some splattering. I did some wet testing to get the color right, where I was happy with it, and you can see me wet testing over and over again and wiping actually took that paint off down to the lower level. That's acceptable, that's understandable, because there's no 40-50 on the outside of this. I'm not worried about that because I'm just gonna come in and paint right over all this. But don't freak out on that. Now, I'm gonna come in and just dab this paint in, and kind of like, I'm not worried about absolute total coverage. If anything, in some of these areas, I want there to look like just partial pieces. And even when they're whole, I don't want them to look like even, because the paint's worn away. If the paint's already chipping and coming off, then it's already kind of worn. So I'm using just the brush itself to dab. You can even just use a Q-tip on this if you didn't even want to use a brush. I want this to look faded. Now, if I get some bleed on this, which I might, you never know. I got this pressed down pretty good, but you never can tell with tape. I can always come in at the green and fix it. It's not that big a deal. Plus, it might look kind of good. Like, yeah, whoever painted it wasn't that careful with insignias anyway. But this also shows that the insignias are painted, because if they were stickers, they'd just be coming off as a whole. So see, I got that nice texture going on there. And then I'm using this comparison right here. There's not even any solid ones until like here. Like this one's a solid one. And even then, it's still kind of modeled. So I'll come in and just as reference, like, oh, this is my first solid one, but I want it to look thrashed, so I'm not making it even. If I want to make it even, I'd airbrush it. Sometimes the texture, if I came in and airbrushed this and spent all the time texturing it afterwards, that'd be kind of silly. And this one right here is really bad. Actually, I'm going to do, not copying it exactly. That would be psychotic for me to copy it exactly. I did a series of statues recently that were reproductions, and I got close to the number of, but the people that are like, oh, every single scrape is the same. No, don't do that, because you're also basing it on the fact that there's probably 3 or 4 different versions online. So don't get that anal retentive with a piece that probably wasn't that accurate to begin with. But you gotta let a little creativity in, you know. It's like me not looking at something, like I'm not even looking at the reference anymore, because now I'm just looking at what I'm doing here. It allows me to make something that I think looks good by comparison to what is accurate. There's a couple of artists out there that are completely correct. If you're doing photorealistic duplication of something, then you don't paint what you know, you paint what you see. Now, there's a couple of artists that say all the time you should always paint what you see, not what you know. Sorry, that leaves out a whole lot of creativity. So with me, I look at things, I reference them, and then I paint what I want to paint. In other words, what I know, what I think looks better, what I think looks good. And yeah, that works good. Now, if you've already promised a client that you're going to copy something exact onto every last scrape, if he's one of those cosplay guys, you better do it. I actually don't put myself into that position very rarely. Now let's keep on doing this. And look, it's starting to dry over here. If I want to dry it faster, take a little bit of air from my airbrush and just kind of blow it. If you blow it and the paint moves around, it actually looks kind of good. Don't worry about it. This will speed the drying process up, which also, if it stays wet too long, it may find a little area to creep. The longer something is wet, the more it has to creep. Like that guy right there, he's wet right there. He may creep on me. We'll find out. We'll see. Now, for those of you that accuse me of cheating, yeah, every day and twice on Sunday, I cheat a lot when it comes to painting, because there are no freaking rules, whatever works best. When I was spraying the air on here to dry the paint, I realized, you know something, this is taking a lot longer than if I just sprayed it. And so I added a little extra tape, and then I came in and just sprayed the yellow solid, because back here there's not much erosion on the stripes. So, and then in here, I added a little bit extra color with the airbrush just to kind of help out. And if it creates a little bit of a halo, that's okay, because you'd see that anyway, even when the paint peels away. In this case, I was already spraying air with the airbrush. Put the paint in there. Didn't even add any reducer to it. Put it back in, it was thin enough. Now, what I will do after spraying this And here's another little trick you can do. Let's say you got a bunch of masked graphics and you don't want any peels. Take some clear, like 40-50 clear, spray it lightly over the entire mask area you're getting ready to paint. What it'll do is, if there are bleeds, that 40-50 will go into where the bleed is. It's clear so you won't really see it. Dry, let it dry. Then when you put the paint in, prevents bleeds. So that's a good thing also. Did I do that? No. Why? Because I'm not a freaking genius. I kind of just play one on TV. But the reality is much harsher. But I get this all nice and dry. This one right here, still a little, I can feel a little tack on it. Want to dry it good. And then I will still come in with my brush and my same mix, but use this to kind of texturify the solid ones I did. The ones that are nice and solid. I'll come in and add this just so they don't look perfect. You know, they might be solid without any major chips, but they're not far from perfect. I want to add this extra texture. And see, it reactivates. Another thing I was noticing when I was doing this, it was reactivating the green underneath a little bit. Another reason why 40-50 could have helped, but I'm willing to sacrifice a little bit of bleeding because that's what I want. You know, when you're ever making something, don't get all perfect on something that's going to be eroded and thrashed. Nothing worse than someone trying to perfectly thrash something. Just kind of, you know, let the paint do it for you. So I want some really bright areas of yellow on these, but not the whole area. And I don't want any of them, none of them get pure airbrushing. It's like when you make a little mistake on something, you know, or make a little texture on something, make sure you do it everywhere else too if it applies. There we go. That one's a little eroded through. I'm going to let that white reactivate and brought the green in. Leave it. That actually looks kind of bitchin'. I'm going to leave it right in there. And that's about it. That's all I'm going to do on that. Clean my brush so it doesn't get all dry and nasty like all my other brushes. And let's hit it with some air before I unmask it. Just a little air just to dry it. Now, understand when you're drying something with air, that's the best way. Don't use any heat, just air motion. When it's dry, it's still going to be drying from the underside and gassing through. But you want it just dry enough so when you're unmasking, you're not getting goopy, wet paint dripping everywhere. So I'm really just kind of giving a nice, just dry to make the paint set better so it's not going to be coming off. And I'm not going to be masking back over that. The reason I mention that, that's important. If you're masking back over something, you got to plan ahead in your strategy. Oh, I'm doing this graphic now, I'm going to be masking over it in 5 minutes. No, you're going to be masking over it in about an hour, because unless you want to lift paint, you know. And I don't care if it's solvent or water-based. Give your paint time to dry. You know, not fully cure, but at least dry so the tape's not yanking on it. If you start pushing the envelope, you're getting really close. Do what I do. Piece of tape. Dull it, and then it'll stick on there without much adhesion. It'll still work as a masking system, but not pull the tape up. If your paint clothes don't have enough lint on them, make sure you buy a few cats at your house, and I guarantee you won't have that problem ever again. So this is almost dry. I'm going to go ahead and unmask it, and we'll come back with it unmasked, and we'll start applying the little chips of silver. No, I haven't shrunk. I just want to get a better angle to paint on this, and so I'm sitting. Also, I'm old, so sitting becomes like a commodity. Anyway, we use Quicksilver on all this stuff, and you get a really close look at it. You can see all the texture coming through. The cool thing about the Quicksilver is it shows any texture in the underlying surface. I really wasn't concerned with sanding scratches. I want this to look like textured, thrashed piece of metal. But the granular aspect of the Quicksilver is so fine you don't see the sparkle or the actual grain, which that gives it that natural metal look. I can come in and Scotch-Brite this and scuff it in a certain direction and respray it, and you'd see lines in it like you'd see in brushed aluminum. I want this bare aluminum to come through as the areas I'm doing the little wear on. And if you can see in the helmet, like here, you can see the worn areas that are coming through. That's that silver, but I don't want it to be a sparkly silver. So I just want it to be that non-granular, like the Quicksilver. Now, at this point in time, I use Quicksilver for almost everything, the Createx Quicksilver, for anything I want that 6061 aluminum look to have. It is airbrushable, but at this point in time, we do not have a brushable version. So what I did found was another brand out there that uses a very similar pigment that's not as shiny, but it still looks like bare aluminum because it's made with aluminum, and it's Modern Masters. Makes a really great brushable, very thick silver. And so I took the Modern Masters and I mixed it with some of the 4050, and that gave me a little bit better adhesion for masking on it if I ever do any masking. Plus, gives a little bit of a commonality for adhesion on here, since everything on here is Createx. Reason I show that, and yes, that's a competing company, because when it comes down to it, and the reason I even work with Createx is you understand the right tool for the right job. Will we eventually come up with a brushable version of Quicksilver? Freaking yeah. But until then, it's like, yeah, do I have the actual bottle? No, I'll mention Modern Master. I'm not going to put the freaking bottle on here. But plus I had a little small bottle I brought with me anyway. So if you're looking for a brushable silver in the model industry, Modern Masters actually has one. There's a number of them out there. You can go look. I've said it before, custom painting is its own warning label. Experiment. Test the stuff out. This is my version, brushable version of it with that 4050 in there. And I'm going to come in and use literally the image I had here before as an example to go by. So like on the front here, I'm just I'm not copying exactly, but I'm using this to create the chippy, thrashed, and if a little bit of it doesn't look as smooth, I don't want it to be smooth. I want the metal, if paint got chipped away, trust me, the metal didn't come away unscathed. It got hammered too. If it was hard enough to pull paint, it probably damaged the metal underneath. So I've done so many of these Boba Fett helmets, it's almost like when you're painting alone at night, you develop names for some of the chips. It's like, oh, I love this chip. This is the chip that looks like Ernest Borgnine and whatever, so maybe you don't do that, in which case I probably just said too much. But anyway, you come in and just keep on adding little texture, little dots, because you ever look, if you really want to know, if you live anywhere where there's gravel roads, look at the front of your car, just copy that. It's probably the exact same kind of chip pattern. So, oh yay, I get to create the thing that my road does every day to my car. And that's what we're doing. We're creating some cool chips and stuff. And of course, there's a big, huge one up here. This helmet does not have a dent in it. Some of the helmets actually have a dent made in them, but I think they didn't do the dent in this model helmet because they wanted people to option out on whether they wanted to be Boba Fett's helmet, which is this one, or Jango Fett's helmet, which does not have the dent, or some of the other Mandalorian helmets that have the heads-up display. You can actually, if you bond it over those two little, his fast forward and rewind, be kind rewind logos, and you tuck rid of the side things, you're talking, and you put a seam right here instead, take a little band and make an 1/8 inch seam across the top and do it all silver, ooh, Mandalorian, instant. So a lot of things you can do with these helmets without having to just do the same helmet. Anyone that following that show knows there's a ton of Mandalorian designs out there.